kid who grew up in the Lutheran church, rock bands touring the country, and community service. And we smash it all together. And in this mashup of episode 19 of the Bishop on a Bike podcast, I sit down and have a conversation with Matt Wilhelm, who has done those three things and put them together. Let's find out in this episode of the Bishop on a Bike podcast. Thanks again to the Mission Investment Fund for making it possible.
It's a fun, you talk about seasons of life. You know, when you came in, we were talking about different seasons of life, and that was certainly one for my wife and I when we were on the road.
So your wife and you did that together?
Yeah, so she and I first met at City Year, serving as AmeriCorps members. She was serving down in Boston, and I was serving up here in New Hampshire, and, you know, every so often the sites would get together, and, you know, sparks flew, and the rest is history. Right. I fell in love 3 times over during my AmeriCorps service. You know, the first was with, you know, the city of Manchester, which I love, and we, you know, ended up staying here and, you know, put roots down here. Yeah. The second being my wife, Jody, she's the best. Yeah. And just so grateful that our paths crossed and we have this shared common experience that is really foundational to our life together. And then the third thing was this, like, the big idea of national service. This, like, that you could do a service a year. You could do a year of service anywhere in the country, focusing on whatever issue you're really passionate about. There are just so many great opportunities that are out there, and that could totally transform American society if that was a common expectation of young people. That, you know, people serving side by side with people who come from all different background, walks of life, socioeconomic status, religions, races. I mean, we served on diverse teams, and that was as much as the experience of working in schools to keep students in school and on track, you know, focusing on attendance and behavior and course performance. And, you know, it's totally a grueling experience, a grueling year, not that much unlike what teachers are dealing with, especially, you know, ones who devote their entire career to that. Just have so much respect for them. But the experience of serving on a team, on a diverse team with other young people, you can't, you know, this day and age, it's funny, if you don't like the conversation that you're having online, you know, we're all online and we're all so connected with each other. But if you don't particularly like something about what's showing up in your newsfeed, you can unfollow or unfriend, and that's not an option when you're in the trenches with people,
with,
you know?
Other human beings.
Yeah, exactly. When you're in community with one another.
Right. So. Yeah. So let's. I want to come back to that, but let's kind of establish the Lutheran credentials here.
Okay, here we go.
Here's
my card.
Right, there's your card. So it looks like the real deal. Yeah. So you grew up in New Hampshire.
Grew up in New Hampshire. Was born in Wisconsin, which was my entry point.
All right.
If you were born in Wisconsin, you're
either Lutheran or Catholic, and there's enough cross fertilization that makes that both ways.
Exactly. My dad was Baptist, and my mom was Catholic, and they just settled on being Lutheran.
Nice.
Which has been a good fit for us. And so we moved from Wisconsin, just outside Milwaukee, that's where I was baptized, to Tyngsboro, Massachusetts, which is just below the New Hampshire border. And we found that we were doing everything in Nashua anyways. So a few years into that, we moved and went to Christ the King Lutheran Church growing up. Yeah. Got my first communion there, was baptized. No, not baptized. Confirmed there.
Right.
And
then a connection somewhere along the way to Calumet.
Yeah, so I never wanted to go to Calumet as a resident camper.
Yeah.
Despite my parents' urging.
Too frightening.
Yeah, I think it's just, you know, I didn't know anybody else necessarily who was going, and I don't know why I didn't go. And I was familiar with Calumet. We went family camping there all the time, and our church would go up, and so it was definitely comfortable there. But didn't want to go to resident camp. But then, you know, hormones kick in, and you're 16, and you're like, for me, I was like, I would really rather be anywhere but in my own house with my parents when I'm, So I went up to camp and well, luckily they took me, even though I hadn't been to resident camp. And they said, that's not really that important to us. What's important is that you
So were you a CIT and did the kitchen thing and washed the dishes for the summer?
Yeah, I was a CIT, and John Hopkins was my trainer.
Okay.
And so John, he walked around with a backpack with a City Year logo on it because he had done City Year a couple years before.
Okay.
So you're just so, being 16, it's such an impressionable age. It's such formative years, and to be away from home for the first time for an extended period of time. I thought John was the coolest, and I thought to myself, if that City Year program that he mentioned a couple times, had anything to do with it, him being the person that he is, and that I should do that.
Yeah.
I should be a part of that at some point.
So you did. So was that post-college, in between? How did you do that?
Yeah. So the cool thing about City Year is you can serve anywhere from 18 to 24, 25. And I really wanted to I didn't know what I wanted to do right after high school. And I really wanted to do a gap year and do City Year. And City Year was actually just getting started in New Hampshire that year. And I had a friend who was doing it, and my parents were like, no, you're going to go to college first. And both my wife and I say we wish we had done it before college, because it would have given us, we just learned so much that year. I talk about formative experiences,
Right.
When we get a bunch of young people together to serve together, like amazing things happen, whether it's at Camp Calumet or, with AmeriCorps, or, people have international experiences, they get to do that, or even like a week-long mission trip. Like, they're just cool things happen when you bring young people together to serve.
Oh, my experience as a parish pastor was the 1 week in the summertime that we took high school kids on a week mission trip, wherever it went, didn't matter. The most significant thing for them and for me to do that for 1 week. I mean, it was just, it could build the whole program around that.
Yeah. Great. Where was one place that you went?
We went different places. When we went primarily with group work camps. And so we were in Pennsylvania, we were in Delaware, we went to Tennessee, we were here in New Hampshire a couple of times, upstate New York, different places. And it was just great.
And
it was
doesn't
the
matter.
most exhausting week of the entire year. People would say, we would go to Honduras, and people would go, oh my gosh. I said, forget Honduras. That's just like, you work 5 hours and you go sit down and siesta for the rest of the day. A week with high school kids, 400 sleeping in a gymnasium in Pennsylvania, painting houses, doing wheelchair ramps, whatever. Completely exhausting, but the most rewarding.
Yeah, because you're on all the time. Because it's as much about the service as the experience that those young people are having together. It's such an opportunity to connect with them, especially as a parish pastor, right? To be, it's this like level playing field, this like equal playing field where we're all in it together, right?
Yeah. So City Year, you did it after college, then?
I ended up doing it after college.
Okay.
And
that was in Boston or?
Here in New Hampshire.
It was in New Hampshire.
So I moved to Manchester. I graduated from Plymouth State and came down to Manchester with a friend who we were riding the chairlift one day up in Plymouth. And he was like, what are you doing after graduation? And I was like, well, I'm doing this program called City Year. And he ended up looking into it. And so we ended up getting an apartment together on the west side. And the rest is history.
Yeah.
So, but it was a really great, really formative experience.
And so, like what did you do during that year?
I led a team. So actually, somebody that I went to church with was on staff. So growing up, went to Christ the King together. Jen Halley, now Jen Little, and she. How are we doing?
Good.
Okay. Yeah, so Jen was on staff at City Year, New Hampshire, and saw my application come in. And at the time, City Year, at least up here, wanted to give a leadership opportunity to a couple of first-year corps members to help lead teams. They just felt like that kind of new, fresh perspective and energy was really helpful. So I was approaching that year being like, I really wanted to be part of the corps. Like I'd been in leadership positions at school and at camp, and I just wanted an experience of serving on a team, right? The typical City Year experience. And so they called me and they said, we'd love for you to serve as a team leader. And I said, and I'm thinking to myself, Jen, is behind this. And I said,
you just want to be a worker bee.
I just wanted to be a worker bee.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just do that and be passionate about it and see how it went. And so I declined, and then they called back. And and I said, I really would like to do it. And they were like, well, we really need someone to step up and take on this role. Mm-hmm. So I ended up having to start my year early. And so I was assistant director at New Haven Day Camp for Calumet. And the bus was heading up to New Hampshire, and I got dropped off at what they call Summer Academy, which is city year staff and like leadership from across the country all gathering together for a week on the campus. I think it was Bentley maybe. So I get dropped off on the Calumet bus, drop me off in this parking lot, and they hand me a uniform, and I'm like off to the races with city year. But it's kind of symbolic. Yeah, I had a really great time with urban day camps throughout my time at Calumet, and I don't know that I would have been as driven to do a full-time year of service, especially in a low income setting.
Right.
If it weren't for that.
And so that after city year, somewhere along in this whole story, there's the connection with all these posters that were in your house here, and I'm looking at Dave Matthews, and, some others, Guster,
Dispatch,
and then there was a band you introduced me to a couple of years ago that you went on the road with.
State Radio, maybe, or Chadwick Stokes.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so, what was that all about? Because were you a roadie? Were you just like plugging in microphones, or? But
you wear a lot of different hats.
Okay.
When you're out there. So when I was at City Year, me and my friend Bobby, we had this idea that, what if we could get these two powerful forces of live music and community service and bring them together? And so we created this program called Concert Corps, where we went to bands that were coming through and we said, hey, we would love to bring you and your fans together for a pre-show community service project that we, all these City Year AmeriCorps members who, in sort of above and beyond, in addition to what we were all doing in schools, we just were passionate about it and wanted to lead these projects. And so we did beach cleanups outside the Hampton Beach Casino Ballroom. We worked with the Blue Ocean Society, a great nonprofit that's getting rid of microplastics off the beach. And we sat down with this band Guster that I grew up listening to and absolutely loved. I'd reached out to their management and said, hey, we'd love to sit down with the guys and talk about a potential partnership down the line. And you think about your favorite artists, it's just what are the odds that they'll even reply, right?
Right.
But they said, actually, Guster is coming to the Timberland Company's corporate headquarters. And at the time, City Year was housed at Timberland. And so they were going to play this acoustic set for employees and their families and stuff. And they said, yeah, no problem. We could totally set up a time to, we'll just get a conference room and we'll kick some ideas around. And one of the members of the band, he and his wife, who's an environmentalist, were starting up an organization called Reverb, which was going to green the music industry. That was their mission. So, there's this kind of social impact on the City Year side and the environmental impact on the Reverb side. And they announced, so Adam, one of the band members, announced to his bandmates at that meeting that they were going to be doing this campus consciousness tour to go to college campuses all over the country later that spring and bringing a bunch of nonprofit partners with them to activate fans in all sorts of different ways. And a couple weeks later, Adam reached back out and said, hey, would City Year want to come along? Would the Concert Corps like to be a part of this experience? And so we applied for this grant and got some money and flew, because again, this is all above and beyond the 45 hours a week that we're in schools. We just flew teams of 3 Corps members in and out of different cities and led pre-show service projects and service learning workshops. And that just sort of ignited. And it's a perfect time in your life. It's a perfect season of your life where you have the energy to do it, and we're trying to make things happen and try to expand service. Try to. So many of us just felt lucky that we had stumbled upon City Year in some way. For me, it was a patch on a backpack and this guy that I looked up to. But we said, what would it be like if more young people knew about it. So for us, being on college campuses and recruiting for City Year one show, there were 17 people who said, yeah, I'd be interested in learning more about that, and, filled out an interest card, and we followed up, and a handful of them ended up serving in the Corps the next summer.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
What a connection.
Yeah.
Great.
So so one of the shows it was actually in Keene, New Hampshire, on the Campus Consciousness Tour. Opening for Guster was this band called State Radio. And State Radio featured a member named Chad Stokes, who was part of this band Dispatch. And he had broken off and started this solo project called State Radio. And so they were opening up for Guster. And I bumped into him and his then girlfriend, now wife, Sybil, backstage. And I had forgotten that Sybil served as an AmeriCorps member with City Year as well. And so she was kind of joking with me that, like, well, why are you doing this with Guster? Like, why aren't you doing it with us? And a year later, it was a year later, they started a foundation called Calling All Crows. And the whole idea was to kind of get fans involved in different types of service and activism and try to make the world a better place, try to leverage their art and their music and their lifestyle. For Sybil, and for Chad, they're on a tour bus all the time. And it just, the routine of it starts to get old. It's always exciting the first few nights, right? You're like, we're on the road, we're gonna go see the country, we get to do this, we all feel so lucky. And then 3 or 4 nights in, you're not getting great sleep and you're working long days and long hours. But what they wanted to do was have somebody on their crew who was just organizing pre-show community service projects out on the road. So that's what I did for 5 years. And
5 years?
5 years.
Did that.
Not full time.
I
right?
know, but still,
you got some breaks.
That's a long season to be doing that.
It is a long season, and some of the best and some of the most challenging, days and weeks and months.
Okay, so tell me,
it's a grind.
Tell me like a high and a low from that. What was a really challenging kind of?
Yeah. Well, to start, when we first did this, we were overly ambitious about what was possible.
Right.
Because you have to totally change the world. We've got the luxury of this bus, so we're going to do service every day on top of what we're doing. And there's this like sort of expectation that, and maybe it's because people didn't know how to say, no, I need some more sleep, or no, I'm tired and I just don't want to do it today. But everybody in the band and the crew was out there every day for the first tour that we did. And it was awesome. We learned a ton and we connected with our communities and with fans in ways that, we never really thought was possible, or that we had imagined, but like until you're actually doing it. Yeah, we just met like the coolest people. So we just played the Fillmore in San Francisco, legendary venue, and we were going to Chico, California. We met up with this, like, I don't even know how we found them, but this grassroots organization that was all about digging up invasive species of plants so that, their natural environment was better protected and could actually thrive in the way that it was originally intended. And we were just like a TV crew showed up, and no fans showed up because it was hard to organize until it sort of caught fire. It's like any grassroots movement, or like starting a church. Like, sometimes it's just you and a couple other people, and that's just how it goes to get started. Mm-hmm. But it was just the band and this like really quirky group of probably 40 and 50-year-olds who were just really passionate about this particular project. And then they held a potluck for us because they just couldn't believe that this rock band on a tour bus wanted to come and volunteer with them. So again, I don't remember how we got connected, but it was one of those things that was like, this is hard. And we were up at like 8 a.m, which after a show, and packing up the bus.
Yeah, and everybody's going to bed at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
If that,
Totally.
Oh my God.
So, but over time, we figured out how to, regulate ourselves.
You're not going to do invasive plant species weed
removal.
hacking every day and play rock concerts every night. Yeah.
No. And eventually we got to this thing where we were like, we're going to do it every Saturday. So we did like service Saturdays, and, we get 50 to 100 people. We had 150 people showed up in Boston for a Dispatch show where we painted a school. paint at a school during the day. And most of the time the band shows up. Sometimes they're not able to, given other commitments that they have, but the fans are like no less enthusiastic about showing up, making a small donation to the nonprofit partner, and it's like magic.
And so any reactions along through doing this from the kind of disconnect that could be in a lot of people's minds of like, wait a minute, rock band's service project.
Yeah.
Anybody kind of look at you or raise that question, or was this like, yeah, this is life?
Yeah, I mean, I got questions from my family. My mom, she still asks me from time to time, like, so how do I tell people what you do? Like when people ask me,
can I give a respectable job title to my friends?
Yeah. And so, like my job title is I'm the director of the Old Soul Alliance. We've been able to kind of spin off some of these ideas and further incubate them or grow them into programs. But my grandpa especially, I would see him in the Bay Area whenever we came through. Usually there was like a day off in there, so I'd take Bart out to Orinda where he lived, and he was in a retirement community there, and I'd go visit him. And this is a greatest generation guy, stormed the beaches of Normandy. You would think that he would like understand this, at least the service side of it. But I think it's just like rock and roll. He's just like, kind of like, what are you doing?
Right.
Like, what?
Right.
So what's next? What's after this?
Right.
So he went to Cal Berkeley.
Okay.
And he gave me my first college tour when I was probably 14. He showed me around campus. I knew I was not going to Cal Berkeley. Didn't have the grades for it. But he showed me around, and he showed me the Greek theater at Cal Berkeley. And I remember he saw the Pope there. He saw the Pope speak there when he was maybe a student going on the GI Bill. And I just remember he snuck me in, like it was closed, but he was like, come under here. And we went under a chain link fence, and we came back around with Dispatch in 2011. They were doing a reunion tour, and I went to go visit Grandpa, and I said, Grandpa, we're playing the Greek theater. And he had this moment where he was like, wow, that's incredible. Versus the Fillmore, which is like, he's thinking Grateful Dead, jam bands, which was like totally countercultural to him. Yeah. But he, in that moment, I like to think that he got it. Like that was the last trip on tour that I went to go visit him. And I was like, yes, okay. Nailed it with Grandpa.
You saw the Pope. I'm here with
yeah, totally. And I think he at least, I think, was like, he understood the status of that, right? Like, and I appreciated the fact that, like, I mean, you got to see the Pope at that place. Like, it's a pretty legendary, it's a legendary spot.
So you do this for a season in your life, and then now today, I'm sitting in your living room in a house that is clearly, you are the parent of young children. Yep. I love the artwork behind you that you're 4-year-old?
No, I did that. Just kidding. Yeah. 5-year-old. 5-year-old Ben, named after Grandpa Ben.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Good. So you're no longer on the road?
No longer on the road. I went back out last. So originally, we started this nonprofit called the Old Soul. We called it Old Soul Music Hall. And there was this really cool old movie theater downtown that
here in
Manchester that we were talking to the city's economic development office about what would it take to turn this into a real deal mid-sized concert venue, like 300 capacity space, but also make it a community center. We were sort of looking for a project to take on. I just finished grad school and needed something to like cement me here so that I wasn't tempted to go off and, live the rock and roll life, which isn't nearly as glamorous as people think, but still it's especially when you're home and, you're in the rigors of family life. Like sometimes it could be tempting. You just want to go back out there. We didn't end up, we built some really awesome relationships with folks and built community support. And ultimately there were a couple failed proposals to the city to take over the space and renovate it. But we wanted to continue doing the work. We wanted to continue figuring out ways to leverage live music to create positive social and environmental impact through service. And So we changed the name from Old Soul Music Hall to the Old Soul Alliance, and that's the thing that keeps me around. Though I did last summer, I went back out on tour with Dispatch to help tour manage, and it was fun to be back out there with friends. But it was a time when right after we had gotten word from the city that we weren't going to be able to take over that space, and we had been building momentum for about a year and a half, and it was a pretty big, it was a crushing blow in so many ways. I mean, you feel like you had let people down, and people had invested in you with their time and their money, and I honestly didn't know what was next for me. And my supportive and amazing and loving wife said, "Yeah, like why don't you go back out on tour, and we'll hold things down here for a few weeks." And that was a one-time deal. I still do weekends from time to time, but it was good to be back out there. And actually, one of the people that we were out there with was Guster. Guster was the opening act on the tour. And so I had lunch, probably once or twice a week with Adam, who started Reverb. And he said to me, well, whatever happened to Concert Corps? And I said, well, we'd still love to do it sometime. We don't know. It could be so many different things. It could be a full-time program. It could be a summer program. It could be a part-time thing. But we'd love to figure out how we can help build capacity for all these great nonprofits that are in the music industry. Calling All Crows, that works with Chad and State Radio and Dispatch, and Reverb that works with Guster, but also like Dave Matthews Band and Fish and Zach Brown Band, and just like huge acts that are crisscrossing the country, working on biodiesel and locally sourced catering and composting and recycling and water refill stations to decrease the number of single-use water bottles that are being thrown out at shows. And it kind of planted this seed, or replanted a seed, that maybe this was a time to bring back that Concert Corps idea. And so we've teamed up with Old Soul Alliance, has teamed up with Reverb and with Calling All Crows to launch a summer pilot of Concert Corps this summer, which is going to kick off in just a couple weeks. And so we've got 3 college students who are going to be serving full time with those organizations, leading pre-show service projects and working out of venues and figuring out, how do we bring these powerful forces of live music and national service together? Yeah.
And you mentioned to me before we started that you're speaking tonight. And just tell me a little bit of what is that, and who are you talking to?
Well, I haven't finished writing it.
I'm
like your typical Lutheran pastor on a Saturday night, right? We're still writing the sermon.
You mean you're supposed to get ready on Saturday night?
You're supposed to do that
Sunday morning as you're driving to church.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I'm speaking to the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service, which was formed to get ideas about how we can grow service in America, and how we can make it more of a common expectation of people to take a season of their life and serve their community, serve their nation, serve the world.
Which is really interesting because some countries have a mandatory service component. Oftentimes we think of the draft, so it's military service. But some countries have options. So you can go a military route, but you can do some other things, like some kind of city year service program, teaching, whatever it may be. Yeah. So is that kind of, you're thinking not necessarily the mandatory thing, but how can we encourage people to embrace this?
That's it. And the voluntary national service is just such a powerful thing. And it served us so well over the years that, especially since we got rid of the draft after Vietnam, that, there's still been plenty of patriotic young Americans who say, yeah, I want to do this, and I want to serve my country in this way. But there are also young people like me. I was in college after 9/11, or during 9/11, and saw a lot of my classmates say, I'm inspired to enlist and figure out how I can help stop the atrocities that happened on that day in New York. And I felt a similar calling, but not that I wanted to enlist, not that I wanted to pick up a gun and have that be part of my contribution. But I knew that serving my community in some way could be equally as powerful or formative for me. That, especially not knowing, I was a communications major, like liberal arts.
Right.
I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I just went because that's what I thought you were supposed to do at that point.
Yeah.
And thought that maybe, because of my experiences at Calumet and at, through church, and I went to a really great Catholic high school where service was a big part of the experience there. I just knew that was something that would, if only buy me a little time to figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
Right. Do you think that those early church camp faith experiences informed this life of yours, this kind of trajectory that you have?
I remember I had a really nice relationship with Pastor John Spangler and Maria Erling when they were at Christ the King in Nashua, and would often find myself sitting across the kitchen table from them and like having conversations about life and learning more about their life at seminary. And they were activists and really involved in their communities, where I actually felt that my life in Nashua was pretty sheltered to some degree. I mean, I went to school, went to church, did the same things, and to realize that there was like a world out there that needed people who were passionate and cared about people, and that weren't just willing to kind of go through the motions. Funny to say that I was going through the motions in college and stuff like that, but it's almost like I was yearning for an experience like that, whether it's activism or service or, there was something, they painted this picture that, of course, in my mind as a 15, 16-year-old, it's like a black and white picture of them in seminary, I can't remember. I think maybe they had gotten arrested or something. And it's just like, the idea of civil disobedience by your pastor was like so badass. I just thought that was so cool. And they were real, Pastor Maria especially, she's just real with people. And I really appreciated that it wasn't what I had, I think sometimes that, because I was also going to a Catholic school, and so there's some real reverence for the brothers who run that place and for priests. It's just a different, very high church experience, and there's a place for that. And I loved singing in the choir at school, and but there's also such value in people connecting over real relevant stuff that impacts your life and encouraging you to follow what you're passionate about and how you can be of service to others.
It's so great. It's really great. Well, good luck tonight.
Thank you.
I hope you come up with something in the next, couple hours.
Me too.
Before the kids get home from school.
Totally.
You won't.
I think we'll come up with something. I appreciate the opportunity to connect. It's fun. We'll save this. This will be as close as I come to writing memoirs. We'll pull out the podcast. The formative years.
You put it on the internet and it's there forever unless Google goes out of business.
Or unless you realize you said something really embarrassing, then I'll send you an email and say, "Hey, Bishop Hazelwood, can you take that down? Right. Or can we re-edit that little part right there?" No, but it was nice to connect.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good. Thank you.